All right, Groovesters and friends around the world, Ridgely here with another Groove Growth program. Very excited to be with a dear friend and a super talented individual, my good friend, Dawn Fleming. Dawn, welcome to Groove Growth. Thanks so much for sharing your wisdom. You certainly have a lot of it, done an awful lot of things, including writing the book, Claim Your Dream Life, subhead, How to Retire in Paradise on a Shoestring Budget. And I don't know, but I'll bet you there's a lot of people that are watching or listening that would like to retire in paradise on a shoestring budget. How'd this all start?
Well, thank you for having me, Ridgely. Appreciate being here. So about 12 years ago, Tom and I left Southern California, jumped on our 50-foot sailboat, sailed 5,000 miles all the way through the Panama Canal, stopped in this lovely little island that we now live on, Isla de las Mujeres, the island of women off the coast of Cancun. We're actually a little bit sad to keep continuing on to Florida, where we had our stuff stored, spent a couple years in the Panhandle, too cold, went down to Southwest Florida about 4 years, and we decided it really wasn't our cup of tea. And since our house moves and we could live anywhere, we jumped on the sailboat and said, let's go down to Isla Mujeres and hang out there. A year before 2016, we bought a beautiful oceanfront villa that has kind of become a micro hotel. And we just started going to the beach and meeting people. And my husband's never met a stranger, so he would just strike up random conversations with people and say, where are you from? Oh, have you been here before? First time, what have you? And part of it was marketing our vacation villa, because there's a lot of repeat guests here. But funny thing happened, they would, of course, reciprocate and say, well, where are you from? And we would say, well, we live here. And they go, really? Wow. How did you do that? And so after probably a couple hundred times of having this conversation, I realized that people were really interested in this lifestyle and, learning more about how they could, live in paradise and also, the stress and all that. And this was pre-COVID for sure. So, it sort of accelerated after the pandemic, and people really took that time to reassess and say, how much do I really like the lifestyle that I'm living right now? So that's really how it started, was just me sharing our journey and the steps that we took to get out of our Southern California rat race. I was a practicing attorney. Tom had an electrical engineering business, and it was just, it was too much. We said, we got to make a change. And that's what started our journey. So
that's fantastic. And there's a lot to unpack there. I mean, first of all, not everybody jumps on a 50-foot sailboat and sails 5,000 miles halfway around the world, right? That's not a normal thing. And then you end up on an island, and through conversations end up deciding, wait a second, not only do we have a beautiful lifestyle, but I can teach others how to do the same, which turned into a course and coaching and mentorship and all of that. And of course, I'm sure there are lots of people who want to find out the specifics of how do you do a dream life on a shoestring budget. And they can look into that on your website, and we'll share with that a little bit later. But what I'm more interested in is the mental side of the game, the mindset. What have you found have been people's biggest hesitations or challenges when it comes to the idea of reinventing themselves? Especially, as you mentioned, the pandemic is such a time for reflection, a lot of suffering, a lot of angst that caused people to say, wait, do I want what I used to have or not? And how do you go about the process of looking at that? But first of all, what have been the biggest blocks in your mind?
Oh, wow. There's quite a few. I mean, starting from the myths about moving overseas, and, people have a really unrealistic sense of that. So and I address that in the book. But that's just really more misinformation or lack of information, if you will. But I think the biggest part really is sort of getting stuck in the rut of thinking that your life needs to be a certain way, whether it's through education or conditioning or pressure, whether it's peer pressure or family pressure. I mean, I was fortunate. I was a second career attorney, so I didn't grow up with, going to high school, going to college, going to law school, and then that's all I ever did. I I had a career before that in real estate. And so I didn't have the family pressure of, oh, you're an attorney, what, don't be crazy, throw away your career and all that. I didn't have any of that. But I know there are people like that. And so some of the folks we serve are professionals and business owners. So a lot of it is like us, they have really complicated lives. And, you've created this sort of, I hate to say it, but, almost a overhead monster that needs to be fed every month. Right. And so you're really constricted. You're on the outside, you look like you've got it all, like, oh my gosh, they've got the house and the nice car and, the great job and income. And in the inside, sometimes you feel really stifled, like you have a void in your soul. I've heard that over and over again from people that, they just kind of were going through, felt like every day was the same. It was like almost like a Groundhog Day sort of phenomena. And it's like, you're just so busy. Every moment seems so rushed. And for folks to step back, and we were all forced to, I think that's the beauty of the pandemic, is we were forced out of that daily grind in, not being able to see people. And, for a while, binge watching Netflix was fine. And then after a while, it's like, I'm bored. And is this all there is? And do I want to go back to what was normal?
Yeah, let's start with that. Let's stop for a second there, because I think that's a big one, right? That so many people, we have what they've called the Great Resignation. We have all of these phenomena that have happened as a result of people being stuck and having to take a hard look at themselves and say, wow. And certainly one of the most difficult things that we can ever do is to open that creaking, groaning, heavy door called our own life and say, yikes, is this all there is? Or is this what I want? Or even can I aspire to something different? When you're coaching people, when you're started to having this conversation, how do you get them started on that journey? Because many of the people who are part of our community, the Groove community worldwide, are exactly in that situation. They're exactly like, I came to Groove, I came to this community because I want more, because I want independence, because I want freedom. And yes, there are the particulars, the tactical things that go along with setting up an overseas dream life. But really, the first thing and the most important thing is you got to make that decision or that choice or that thing. So how do you help people go through that process of exploring themselves so that they can prepare to make a commitment big enough to make a dream come true? Big question.
Yeah, no, it is. It's a big question. It's a good question. And I'll take the opportunity here to mention my podcast. So I have a podcast called the Overseas Life Redesign podcast. And I had an opportunity to interview someone not too long ago who helps people with transitions like this. And I was very fascinated into diving into this particular topic with him. And I wasn't surprised at all to hear him say he runs retreats like in the Himalayas, like in the middle of nowhere. And he said, part of it is the context that they're in, right? He said, I could not achieve the same revelations, transformations, if I were to host these retreats in a hotel ballroom. Mm-hmm. But when they have to get on a plane, fly halfway across around the world, get off, take a bus, go through all of the things that you need to do to get to this remote retreat location. There's no internet, there's no phones, there's no distractions, right? And you're in nature, and you really have that opportunity to step away, like really far away from the normal life that you live. And I know for us, that's what started it. So when Tom and I got married back in 2003, we went to the British Virgin Islands. We chartered a sailboat for 16 days, just the two of us. No one was invited. We got married on our honeymoon. I was number 3 for him. He was number two for me. So it was all about us and starting our new life together in the way that we wanted it to be. Well, what happened is something that Tom calls crossing over, which is being away from your current environment long enough to get into a different routine.
Mhm.
And so when we flew back to Southern California, and I was practicing law at the time, I had a client who owned a limousine service. And so we used to trade services. So we got in the limo, we jumped on the 405 freeway, and there were 6 lanes of traffic in each direction, none of it moving. We were back in the concrete jungle after spending, hadn't been in a car for 3 weeks, and being in the beautiful Caribbean water. And that's really what made us take stock and say, this is our life. What were we thinking? Right? But it was normal until we did that. But once you extract yourself out, and I think that's one of the best ways to do that. And that's why I run semi-private retreats. We encourage people to vacation with a purpose. When you go on vacation, go somewhere with the idea that, is this somewhere I might want to live? And try to live like a local to the extent you can. Don't stay in a 5-star resort with all inclusive, because that's not how you would live there. And also the beta test, having people go for a month if you can, 2 months, 3 months, and just try out a different lifestyle as a short-term commitment. And my friend Diane likes to say, it's not forever, it's just for now. And I think we get caught up with this idea that, I'm making this, and I always laugh now. People say, well, did you move there permanently? And of course, and you'll love this, my answer is, nothing's permanent.
Yeah. You know what? It's interesting because I've had a number of guests on Group Growth, and they live in remote locations and they do amazing things. And yet they still operate their business from those places. So one of the big things that I love about this conversation is the reminder to people, if you're a part of this community, you're a part of community of believers who can actually do things that are different so that they get different results. I was laughing at myself yesterday since I happened to be here visiting you on the island and walking down the boardwalk overlooking the sea and thinking, okay, so I'm going home and I'm going to be home for a little over a month. And then I'm going to Europe, and then it's Christmas, and then and none of my business is interrupted because it's been created in my vision, right? And I think it's such a big thing. You're saying one of the steps is put yourself somewhere so that you can have that kind of a vision that opens you up to the possibility of what's real. I mean, with your example was so classic, having lived in Southern California for 20 years and going out to Southern California at least once a quarter or so. And I get off the plane and get on the bus to the rental car thing and get in the rental car and get on the 405 freeway. And instantly in my mind is, well, I guess I'm back on the 405 again. Crawling, doesn't matter what time of day, doesn't matter what day of the week. And you think to yourself, why do people do this every day, day in, day out? And it's much like what we were talking about. They're locked into that paycheck, they're locked into that lifestyle, and they never took a minute to say, could it be different for me? Wow. My friend Croy Sather, he's down in Colombia. He's down in Medellin right now. He is one of the world record holder long distance runners. He does like crazy things. Like he ran 100 marathons in a row, one every single day across America. So he ran across America. Now, why is he down in Colombia? Because he's training in South America, because he wants to be the first person to run from Tierra del Fuego at the bottom of Argentina all the way the entire South America, which is much longer than all the way across the United States. So he says, for me to train on that, I should probably just go down to South America. Well, I have an online business. I teach this particular thing to people, and that's exactly what he's doing. And last time we had a conversation with him, he said, yeah, no, I'm a little tired. And I said, yeah, what'd you do? What did you do? 20 miles? And he goes, how'd you know? That's exactly what I just did. He just went out and knocked out 20 miles. It's doable. It's possible. So let's talk about the one thing that I'm sure is paramount in preparing for this, which is mindset. How can people get their mindset ready? Something that you coach and teach people, and super valuable to all of our listeners, because it's how do you get your mindset ready to do something different, to have a different business, to go deep into your Groove platform and create it's all the same, right? How do we get past the blocks, the challenges? What do you do to help people with their mindset?
Well, it's sort of the same thing I did as a business attorney, and I laugh about this now, but it just was so intuitive to me. When I would get a business client come in to see me and they would want to get their new business set up, one of the first things I would ask them is, what's your exit strategy? And they would look at me like I had two heads, and they're like, well, what do you mean? I'm just starting my business. Why are you asking me about my exit strategy? And I would say, well, because for me to help you, you have to give me what your goal is. What is the ultimate result you're looking for? Otherwise, there's different ways to structure business, as you well know. But it was a foreign concept for people. And designing your life is really the same thing. You start with the end in mind. And a lot of times especially if we're maybe struggling financially, or we're thinking our options are limited, a lot of times we have a hard time with that. You get stuck in these ruts, and you're, the inside the box thinking, if you will. And so I found that it's sort of a Jedi mind trick. You can, and Jim Rohn used to say, right, you can do anything in 5 years. You can really completely change your life in 5 years. So I find that's a good amount of time, because it sort of tricks the conscious mind into thinking, well, that's 5 years from now. So that's a long time. Okay, I'll allow you to create a vision of 5 years from now. Not a year from now, because that's not possible, right? It's sort of this limited way of thinking. But if you can come up with that 5-year vision and say, okay, and I talk about this in the book, is assume you won the lottery. You've got $50 million in your bank account. You can do anything you want to with your time and your energy. What are you going to do? And you start that process. You get that subconscious mind going. You slap that conscious mind around a little bit and say, just, let us play for a little while here, and really get that to work. And it doesn't happen overnight a lot of times, because if we are living this sort of restricted life or this restricted thinking, you can't just flip a switch sometimes. And I created this fun little paradise checklist. It's just a little multiple choice quiz to just start that process for somebody that's really stuck. And it's like, I don't know, I can't think beyond my immediate circumstances. Then it's just a way to kind of sort of start that process. But by doing that, then an interesting thing happens. One of my very first client, actually, I started working with, they came in working with me with a 5-year plan. And through this process that I described, and the system of goal setting and planning and really mapping it out, within 10 months, she had retired and they sold their house, and they actually came down here to Isla and did a beta test. I mean, that's the power of being crystal clear about what your end result looks like, is you can really compress those timeframes down to, you'd be amazed what can happen. And, I often say too, the universe loves a made up mind. And you really enlist all the powers of that are out there. We're energetic beings, and you pull that energy into you, and it's astounding what can happen in a very short period of time.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point too, because the idea, I love that the 5-year, let's make a 5-year plan, because even if you don't compress it, if you start making lots of steps, you start to see a huge evolution. It's like people starting a business and thinking, oh man, I'm starting my online business, and by 6 months from now, I'm done. I'm like, what? No, it is not as easy as people think, but it's also doable. And I think both those two things, bringing together that concept of, no, it is never as easy as you think. It probably is going to take longer, probably going to cost more in terms of resources, in terms of energy, in terms of aggravation, in terms of gray hair, in terms of all kinds of things. Yet, if you do make up your mind to do something different and create that vision, you just start taking steps in that direction. And what have you found as people, you work with these clients and such, what are the things that they have to do to re-energize when they feel that, oh, I can't do this anymore? How do you help them get over the humps that inevitably come along the way?
Well, a lot of it is really about letting go, right? That's really, really the key to it. And, in our circumstance, for example, we made the decision in 2003 after we got back from our honeymoon trip, and said, we need to make some changes. And we started a plan. It took us 7 years to be able to move, because this little thing called the financial crash in 2008 came along. And while we had our plan and we're working, and it was a 5-year plan because of the nature of our businesses and our lives, like I said, very complicated, but it got extended because there were circumstances outside of your control that, didn't allow you to fulfill your plan. And that happens a lot. And I think, for me, the worst part about that was the emotional piece, because I had never been late on a payment in my entire life until I was almost 50, and I had 3 houses in foreclosure. And so emotionally, it was very difficult. It was a very, very difficult time in my life. I gained weight, I was stressed, and it was actually a mentor that I was working with just for a short period of time, but it was so huge. And he just said, Dawn, what would your life look like if you were emotionally unattached to your real estate? And I just said, oh my gosh, I could feel the stress like leave my body as soon as he said that. I'm like, I don't really need to be attached to this. Like, it's outside of my control. I can't make these banks work with me. I can't, I've done everything in my power, and I just have to let it go, because it's really hurting me to do that. And I think that's probably one of the hardest parts sometimes. And it could be a business. I've been involved with businesses before, and you're like, you're working so hard, and you're, and yet, like, you keep hitting brick wall. Maybe that's a sign from the universe that says, this is not your path, right? But sometimes it's really hard to know. It's like, is this really a hump that I just need to get over? Or is it really time to just throw in the towel and say, nah, maybe this isn't the path? Right?
Yeah, I remember. But I was just thinking about how my own online marketing journey, and it's been so many pivots, right? And right before the pandemic, I had a booming speaking business, traveling all over the world, spoken in 35 countries already, and a massive slate of engagements, all booked out. I was on the road 60% of the time, right? Doing very well. And especially because as a high paid speaker, it's kind of easy, right? You show up, you speak, you pick up a check, you're done, right? There's no follow up, there's no mess, there's no nothing, there's not a residual. You walk back home, put the money in the bank, and bam, it looks awesome, right? Every single engagement was canceled. Everyone cancel. And suddenly it was reinvention time. What was interesting was there was never any fear. I've been a psychologically unemployable serial entrepreneur since forever. So it was like, okay, wow, this looks interesting. I wonder what I'm going to do next. And it became okay, that's not working. What can? And then bringing everything online, all the speaking online, webinars, Zoom, all of that became the new way. And it's been a complete reinvention. And now it's more successful than ever. Far more successful than my speaking career, by the way, which is kind of super crazy. And yet it took that moment of in my case, forced re-examination, re-exploration, re-look at this. In my case, I couldn't be attached to the speaking career because it was gone. It did not exist anymore. It was 100% cancel. Not just in America, because in the past I could have taken this thing all over the world, gone, finished, done. Now in a new space, at home as much as I want, traveling as much as I want, I never want to go back to that. It's kind of like you getting on the freeway in the limo saying, what? This is not us anymore. Forget about it. Now I'm here on the island doing a little bit of work. And after this, I think we're going to go snorkeling or we're going to do something. And why shouldn't it be like that if you have the ability to design it, as you said, overseas life redesign, but it doesn't have to be overseas. It can be at home life redesign, wherever you live right now, life redesign. What do you think are the aha moments? I love talking about aha moments because aha moments are like, for you, getting in the limo on the freeway after that was like an aha moment. What are the aha moments that you see in the people that you coach?
Well, one of them is really getting clear about what you're good at and what you're passionate about and lining those two up. So when the crash came, I was already kind of getting burned out on the business. I had stopped practicing law. I was working with a direct sales company that offered legal services, and it was to companies. So all my companies were closing their doors, massive layoffs. Like, I mean, you know, my not that enjoyable business really became unbearable when that happened. And I knew I had already started trying to figure out, how do I make a change? Found a mentor, really awesome little exercise that I actually include in Claim Your Dream Life. But what I did is I went through that process. I figured out my skills, my passions, I lined them up, and I actually was moving forward to develop a coaching and consulting business for entrepreneurs. I love working with entrepreneurs. I love their energy. I love people who are willing to take a risk. And that's what I was marching toward. And I found a business coach. I was really developing everything. And then out of the blue, I got an opportunity to work with a startup. And it was folks that I had worked with in the previous direct sales company. And I was able, because of the work that I did in figuring out where I wanted to put my energy and my skills and my passions, what I wanted to do, which was networking, meeting new people, speaking, teaching, training, was all part of this opportunity that came out of left field. So I was able to make the decision to say, you know what, I can always do this later. I pushed it to the back burner. I ran with this opportunity, and Tom and I were blessed to make $1 million on a part-time basis in 6 years. That allowed him to retire from he got a wonderful job that allowed me the freedom to build the business. And then within a very short period of time, about a year, I was making 4 times as much money as he was as a electrical engineer in a corporate situation. So he was able to retire. We moved to South Florida. But had I not done that inner work in really assessing what was important to me, where I really wanted to use my life energy, I would not have been able to evaluate that opportunity. And this is something I learned from the first job that I had as a lawyer. And that's what Frank always said. He said, Dawn, you need to have a plan. And you put your plan together and you start marching forward and you work your plan. And then these different opportunities are going to come out at you from left field. And if you have your plan, you then have a compass, a measurement tool that you can look at that says, is this a good fit with my plan? Because you've already figured out that destination, whether it's personal or business, right? If you have that 5-year vision of where you want to go, that becomes your really your compass and your filter to say, does this fit? No, this doesn't fit. This doesn't fit with where I want to go. And I think that's something that maybe is missing for folks, is they don't have that measurement stick to know whether something makes sense or not.
You know, I think you're right that plan your work your plan thing is really real, because when you have that Geiger, and if you are an entrepreneur or have an entrepreneurial spirit and just keep your mind open, opportunities present themselves all the time. Like in my case, at this point, it's weekly. There's another thing that's weekly, and it requires the discipline to say, is this a shiny object or is it part of the plan? And I've developed, frankly, a very strong ability to say, no, it's not. And therefore it doesn't fit. And therefore the answer is easy. It's no, not even it's maybe. Not even it's possibly, it's no. It's no, because we're on this plan. This is what we're doing. This is what we care about. And by the way, and I'd like you to address this for a second, doesn't mean that you don't have to keep your other hustle going or your other thing going while you're working on your plan. It doesn't mean that you have to separate yourself from what sustains you while you're working on your plan. It doesn't mean you have to throw away anything necessarily. It's more about getting clear on the plan and taking those steps on a continuous basis so that eventually you do exactly what you want to do. I'd love for you to speak to that. When you're working with clients, they still got their job, they've got their thing, they've got their whatever. How can they still also work their plan?
Well, that's really just having a system of personal management, and that's really something that I teach, because very few people have that. I mean, one of the best gifts that we got when we worked with that startup company, we were given executive coaching that the company supplied for the leaders of the company, and that's really where I saw the dramatic change in not just ourselves, but also the leaders that we work with and the folks that adopted the system of personal management. And it's not rocket science. I mean, it's really just plan tomorrow before tomorrow comes. Really discipline yourself to turn off the notifications. Don't multitask. Focus on what it is you're working on. Don't check your email first thing in the morning. Don't get sucked into the social media feed or the news feed. And there's so many time wasters out there right now. And I was actually just listening to a webinar with a gal that's making $1 million a year. And she said one of the things that was a game changer for her was to keep a Google Doc and write down every 30 minutes what she had spent the last 30 minutes doing. And she said, boy, that's a wake up call, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's so important. By the way, whatever your routine is, to just create a routine that works for you. I get, for me, my morning time is my most productive time. My brain is freshest. However, it really serves me to get up in the morning, get my cup of coffee, clear the slate. So I actually do clear my email first thing in the morning, because then I know I don't have to worry about it. But here's the thing. It only takes 10, 15, 20 minutes. That's it. So then if that happens at somewhere between the 7 and 8:30 hour, then for the next 3 to 4 hours is my absolute most productive time. And that is when I slot in. These are the most important projects. All my phone calls or whatever are pushed to the afternoon, generally speaking, because I want that time to focus on the key things. Having that routine and knowing yourself, hey, what is the thing that makes you the most productive and how do you stay on task? That self-management is critical. And, and that's what do you think is the biggest? Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, it made me think of my friend Diane here that's on the island. We get up really early. Cats, 6:30, 7 a.m. and we're morning people. But my friend Diane, she's a night owl. She'll sleep till 10 o'clock in the morning. She'll get up. She sets an alarm, God love her, every day at 4 o'clock. Her alarm goes off. It says, time to go to the beach. And she'll go to the beach. She'll have dinner and she'll get back and she'll go get to work at about 7 o'clock at night. And she'll work until like 2 in the morning. And those are her productive hours. So absolutely, I agree 100% that you got to work with the rhythms of your own personal preferences and figure out when is the time that's best for you, because it's different.
Have you found that there are certain self-sabotage bombs that people like to detonate in their own dream process? And if so, what are those? What are the worst ones that you see in helping people redesign their life? Well, what the ones that what are those?
Well, I don't want to get too controversial, but I'm surprised by the number of people that I've spoken with that don't see eye to eye with their spouse, and that I find kind of sad. in a way, but then sometimes I guess people just grow apart and they don't have the same dreams and aspirations. I mean, Tom and I are blessed that, we have very similar fundamental interests and goals. They're in alignment, but I guess folks that have been married for a long time, maybe it's just time to move on. And I find that a little bit sad that when that happens. But at the same time, like, do you really want to stay in a relationship that doesn't serve you? So it's a tough one for me to see happen.
Yeah, that bomb at home, the at home sabotage bomb is very, very real. I think people can work through them, but it takes a lot of work. What about on this same vein? How do you help people course correct when they start out all gangbusters and they're doing really well for the first little piece? Because this happens a lot and happens all around the world. And of course, we don't think that we're immune to that inside the Groove community, because we're not. So how can we help course correct when we're all in for a while, but then life slaps you around a little bit, things get a little tougher, and you kind of start straying off the working your plan? How do you help people get back on track, or what do you encourage them to do or be so that they can get back on track?
A couple things. I think it's really super important to celebrate small wins, because those are the things that ultimately are going to get you to your goal. So if you're just focused on the final prize and not really recognizing your progress, it's going to be harder. So, and, whether that's, going out for dinner and celebrating, or getting a massage or whatever, just, rewarding yourself and giving yourself little incentives for the smaller victories can be huge. But I also think that having that vision in front of you constantly is really important. And Tom and I sort of took it to an extreme. So when we got back from our trip in 2003, my house had been remodeled when I bought it back in 1990, but it was all white walls and whitewashed cabinets and very neutral colors. And it was just screaming for color. So room by room, we remodeled it. And in the dining room, I actually painted a 2-wall mural of an ocean scene with balusters and hills on each side, breaking waves, islands in the distance. And it was actually photos from our trip to the British Virgin Islands that I had pieced together. Now, I've never done anything like that before. I'd never painted a mural before, since I've painted a couple. But that was our life-size dream board that we saw every single day. That really, you're having coffee, you're having dinner, whatever it is, you walk in the door, like, there's your dream board. So we are really visual creatures. We really, our subconscious really communicates in pictures, not words. When we dream in images. We don't dream in words. And so to the extent that you can use visual cues, whether it's a screensaver slideshow on your computer that plays, Tom's got a picture of his next motorcycle on his screensaver, right? And keeping those bigger goals in front of you is really important, because that's the subconscious is what's going to sabotage you ultimately. So if you can enlist that subconscious, say, hey, this is what we're working for. And if you're trying to lose weight, the picture of you thin on the refrigerator door, right? That's, been proven that actually works, because you're communicating with your subconscious. Hey, we look like this. We don't look like, like this.
Well, and I think it's amazing. And by the way, for all of the people who are actually watching this, not listening, the picture that you have as your screensaver behind you is the picture right off the balcony of your house. So that Caribbean Sea that you are seeing, if you're watching this in video, is exactly where Dawn lives with her husband, Tom, right now in paradise. So parting words, one final thought that you might have before we talk about a couple of gifts that you have for everybody, one final thought that you might have for anyone who's looking to redesign their life, whether that's overseas or where they live right now. What would you want to tell that person who's heard you speak and said, wow, I really would like to redesign my life? What would you want to tell them?
Well, I think it's really what I believe at my core, and that is a world where on your deathbed, you never think, what if, right? Living a life without regrets and living fully and taking those chances. And if it doesn't work out, you just course correct and you do something else, or you go back to your old life or whatever it is. But I just, I don't want to see anybody give up on the idea that you can create a pinch me. Is this real existence? Because you absolutely can.
Thank you so much, Dawn. I know that you have a couple of gifts as usual. Crew, click the button below. It will take you to Dawn's website, which is overseaspatriots.com or opats.com and opats. And tell us, you got a couple things there for people.
Well, if you go there, you'll see a couple things. One is that little paradise checklist. If you just are really struggling with dreaming again, just download that. It's just a fun little quiz, and I'll kind of get the juices flowing. There's also a answer guide, the ultimate answer guide for starting your overseas dream life, and it's got the top 10 most frequent questions that I get about that process. And that's totally free as well. And there's also a link to grab my book. It's available anywhere books are sold. So you can just get the book from your favorite bookseller.
And in addition to all of that, I would also recommend that you listen to the Overseas Life Redesign podcast with Dawn Fleming, the author of Claim Your Dream Life. Dawn, on behalf of the Groove community, just want to say thank you so much for your time and wisdom. A lot of great stuff to unpack for everybody that is either watching or viewing this. And for everybody out there, we'll see you next time on the next Groove Growth program. This is Ridgely signing off, and ciao for now. Bye, everybody.